Welcome, guys, to Mostly Basketball. This is our first ever episode where we just talk basketball pretty much, but if any other sports come up, like football or hockey or something actually interesting and baseball happens, we will talk about that too. But for the most part, we're talking college basketball and the NBA. So the way this podcast works is we're going to have a wheel, and me and David choose 6 topics, and the wheel is going to be just spun, and whatever comes up is what we talk about, and we hope you all enjoy it. So David, what do we have for our first one today?
So our 6 categories are, we're going to talk about the greatest of all time debate in basketball, the NBA trade deadline moves, national title contenders, college basketball commits, as today we had Anthony Edwards committing, so that's big news. Who's on top of the East with the new look Sixers and key additions to the Bucks and the Raptors, and the current state of Kentucky basketball because we are from Kentucky. So let's get it going.
And spinning.
So our first topic looks like it's going to be who's on top of the East. This is a fun question because we have a little bias because Wade is a Celtics fan, and I am just a general fan. I'm a Bulls fan, but we can't talk
Bulls
about
fan.
that.
So the top and the bottom we have, and then everything in between.
So let's talk about key additions for each team. The Bucks added Niko Mirotic, which is going to add a lot of spacing for them, which is really good, having the best player in the East, Giannis. The Raptors added Marc Gasol, giving away Jonas Valanciunas. The Sixers obviously added Tobias Harris, which is a plug-and-play and a key addition in any team. And then the Celtics didn't really do anything. But a key thing for the Celtics is that the Lakers did not get Anthony Davis. So they're in the running. So as much of an unbiased opinion as you can muster, what do you think? What do you think is the best addition? And what do you think is going to be the Eastern Conference Finals? And who's going to make it?
Honestly, I think the 76ers probably made the best move with the best moves, really. Tobias Harris, obviously, the big one. And I think, like you said the other day, Tobias Harris is kind of that person that you can drop on any team and him make an impact. Like, he can fit with any team, just the way he plays. And I think he's a huge addition to their starting lineup. They also, they got rid of Markelle Fultz. So they don't have to deal with that drama anymore. They don't have to try to develop it. That whole thing was just a disaster. So for them, it's good that they've gotten that out of the way. And for him, they got Jonathan Simmons, who I think would be pretty good off the bench. We saw what he did with the Spurs. We knew he has it in him. And then they got a couple of picks, I believe.
They did. They got a first and a second.
Okay, first and second. That's pretty good for a guy that gave you nothing. We will see if the Magic can actually do something with Markelle, if he can get better, if they can develop him. But right now, it looks like the 76ers won that. And I think that they're the team that wins the trade deadline in the East.
Something interesting about Tobias Harris, and I think him and the Clippers have gone under the radar this year with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Gallo is actually playing really well, and Tobias. Gallo is shooting, I believe, like 48%, correct me if I'm wrong, but from 3.
Dang.
And Tobias Harris is shooting 44% from 3. In the new wave NBA, that is nuts. And for a guy that can stretch the floor, be the 4 next to Joel Embiid's 5, giving Joel Embiid the paint by himself, it kind of looks like the Magic did when they had Brian Anderson and Dwight Howard, where Dwight Howard is able to just dominate the paint by himself.
Yeah.
So in that situation, now you have Joel Embiid, who has one of the best post games in the league, able to have the paint by himself. Something now too, the Sixers have just dominated with their bench and additions.
I forgot about Boban.
Yep.
He had like 10 points in the first game.
Yeah. So now they're deep. They got obviously Simmons, JoJo, Jimmy Butler, and Tobias Harris are kind of what they're dubbing their big 4. And then, but beyond that, J.J. Redick is also a plug-and-play. Any team is going to be a key addition. You have Boban, T.J. McConnell, who can really score for an off-bench guard, and Jonathan Simmons, who just got added. Mike Scott. This team is deep, and I think if I had to say so, even though I am kind of a Joel Embiid fan, I'd say the Sixers are the team to beat in the East, even though they're not the top record.
I don't like the Sixers, but I agree. They've made smart moves the past couple of years, specifically this year, getting Jimmy Butler for virtually nothing and adding these players and getting rid of a problem child in Markelle Fultz. I think they're probably the big one to the other one to beat, even though their starting lineup is just as good as anybody in the NBA. So especially the East, and they go deep, which is more than most East teams can say.
And now we're recording this on Monday.
Monday.
So yesterday, Sixers played the Lakers, and obviously the Lakers are LeBron's team, so they're kind of one to beat, even though they're 500. Kuzma put up 39. LeBron had nearly a triple-double, and the Sixers blew him out and scored 143 points. I mean, JoJo had 37, Tobias had 22, Jimmy had 15. Ben Simmons only had 8, 7 assists. He doesn't even need to do anything with this new look. JJ 21, TJ 13, Boban 10. I mean, this team is deep. This team is well-rounded, and they just gave LeBron a big fat loss and 143 points in regulation.
I guess we have a small sample size because this is only their first game with their new look roster, but defense, I guess, allowing the Lakers of all people to score 120 is something that doesn't bode well for your defense. So I think that we'll have to keep an eye on that. I know they have the defensive pieces in place, but we'll see if they can pull it together and not allow a bad team to score 120, because that's pretty bad.
Actually, to go back on that, their first game with Tobias was against the Nuggets,
right?
The then number 1 seed in the West, who they beat them.
Yeah, beat by 7 points.
Yeah, and Tobias plugged right in for 14. JJ at 34. All starters were in double figures. This team's scary.
If I remember, it was pretty close. Like, it was a 7-point win, but I think that was due to free throws at the end, not how the actual game played out. I think it was a close game for most of it.
But given how good the Nuggets are, close game or not, that's a good win.
Moving on to another team in the East, the Bucks. We saw who did they add? Did they add people? Mirotic, right. They added a little bit of a stretch 4, and I think that helps them a lot, spreading the floor, and that'll certainly make them a better team. But we also saw, without Giannis, they're probably the worst team. Not the worst team in the league, but they're pretty tragic without Giannis. Because the other night, what was the score?
It was 103 to 83. The Bucks got blown out by the Magic, and Giannis sat that game. So that kind of tells you a lot. In my opinion, this is kind of the new look Cavs, where Giannis is playing the LeBron role. And if Giannis isn't there, then this team is a struggle fest.
And that kind of makes a little bit of a case. I don't actually know how much he's been talked about in this conversation, but for the MVP race, you see how much Giannis means to them. Just that one player. I know James Harden and PG-13 are up there in the voting, but this game alone should show you how valuable Giannis really is. I mean, if we're just talking about most valuable player, this is a huge case for Giannis, and if he sits out any other games, it should be a huge case for that as well.
I think right now the MVP race is Harden, Giannis, Paul George. It's hard to match what Harden's doing. Currently, his 30-point streak is at 29 games. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's Wilt Chamberlain is only on top, and I don't think that's ever going to be beaten. So this is something that we can talk about when we're adults.
And the voters love streaks and historic records. Just for an example, a couple years ago when Russell Westbrook had averaged a triple-double, he got MVP. We believed that it should have been Harden. And the very next year, Russell Westbrook also averaged a triple-double, and he wasn't even in the conversation. So that just tells us that it shouldn't have mattered, and then it should have been Harden. So, but obviously we are not voting. These people of the media are. So we think. It's obvious that James Harden is probably going to get it. Like, Paul George doesn't have the headlines that James Harden is, nor does Giannis.
Right. And on the season, Paul George is averaging, I think, 28, like 8 and 6 or something, like insane numbers, but it doesn't compare to. I mean, Harden's averaging 35 on the season, so it's stats. Moving on to the last team, the Raptors, I think, are the only other team that you can talk about having contention. Other than the Celtics. And I think the Raptors adding Marc Gasol, this feels like another rental to me. It feels like Kawhi is going to go somewhere else, whether it be the Clippers or the Knicks or whoever. It seems like he's going to go somewhere else. And Marc Gasol, he's risky to me. He's a big guy. He's injury prone. I feel like the Raptors never make a serious, noise in the playoffs. And I feel like this year their hype is built up and they're going to get shut down. Yeah. But Kawhi is a player that's been top 3 in the league for a little bit. He's kind of out of that running right now, but he's a player that can turn it on. Former Finals MVP. We'll see how he can make a noise in the East.
It does seem though that Raptors are trying really hard to make a case for him to stay. And if I were him, I would be thinking about it at least, because they're putting pieces around him. They got Marc Gasol, which I don't know how long. I mean, what is he? 34 now.
Right.
I don't think he's not a huge thing. It's they're doing their best, but if I was Kawhi, I'd definitely be thinking about it. And as for the Celtics, I think they dropped to 4th just straight up as talent-wise, just because they didn't make any moves, and just their overall roster. And it pains me as a Celtics fan to say this, but I actually don't know if I think that it's a good move or not. I think maybe we should have made one move, and I think we still might. Enes Kanter is out there as the New York Knicks waived him. What did they agree upon?
They bought him out.
They bought him out.
Yeah.
So he would improve our rebounding a lot, which has been our struggle for about 5 years now. So that's still something that could improve us a lot. But I think the overall problem with the Celtics is the chemistry. It seems like Marcus Morris the other night said it hasn't been fun for a while.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge problem, and it's been obvious as they play, because we know that they have the talent. They have Kyrie, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Al Horford is really he's been the one solid player, just as far as chemistry and play throughout the season. And it's going to take a little bit of that leadership by Kyrie, I think, though. He's the one that has the most power as far as a little bit of a veteran, but also skilled enough to be everybody is looking up to him. So I think he needs to be the leader on this chemistry thing. But we can hold out hope for Anthony Davis, and that would be far worth it if we could get him and make him stay by next year.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Let's move on to the next spin wheel thingy. Our next topic.
So our next topic is Anthony Edwards committing to Georgia. That's big news, and that really shakes up. It seems like these big guys are leaning towards going home. We got what's his name going?
James Wiseman.
James Wiseman going to Memphis just because it's close to home, and he's playing under Penny Hardaway. And now we have Anthony Edwards, supposedly contention for the #1 pick in the 2020 NBA draft, going to Georgia. They're a football school. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not a basketball school, but
I think let's just first take you through the saga of what happened with Anthony Edwards. So he was originally in the class of 2020, so he reclassified, and in his class he was not the #1 recruit. When he moved to 2019, he did become the #1 recruit in many publications' eyes, and that just shows how good, first of all, the 2020 class is, but just also how good he is, that he was able to top pretty much everybody in this class that is older than him by a year. And then he started off with his list being at 5. It was Georgia, Florida State, Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas. Actually at Duke, so it's 6. First one he cut was Duke. That was around December. And then just within the past 2 weeks, he cut his visit from Kansas and then cut them from the list. He cut UNC from the list. And then in the past week, he cut Florida State's visit. So for a long time, people have been slated him as the Florida State has got him, and it's everybody else's. It's theirs to lose, and it's simply because Leonard Hamilton, the coach at Florida State, is best friends with his high school coach. So he's been up on him for a while, and recruiting him since he was a freshman. But then get to this week when he cuts Florida State's visit and says that he's announcing today, which was Monday, this morning. Everybody was expecting Georgia because, for the most part, a guy in the state that is considering the in-state school, declaring while he's still playing high school basketball in that state, he's not gonna choose against the school and then have to keep playing in that state where everybody's gonna boo him everywhere he goes. Tyler Hero is the one exception. He did do that, and he did get booed everywhere he went. But with James Wiseman, he committed in, I think, December or November. He still had a whole season of basketball to play in Memphis. He's not gonna commit, obviously, if he's going somewhere else. So this is For the most part, if you see a guy committing during his high school season, and one of the considerations is his in-state school, you have to kind of give it to the in-state school. That seems to be a given. One thing I want to talk about first is these guys that are considering these non-blue blood kind of schools like Memphis and Georgia, and what that means. First of all, I think it means he wants to be the guy. He can say whatever he wants, but he wants the ball in his hands. I will give it. Part of the reason is his sister just had a baby. He has a lot of relationships with the coaches down there, and he wants to be closer to his family. That's kind of something he said before he even committed, so it became obvious. But since 2006, when the one and done started, the top 3 or top 5 candidates, all the ones that have not gone to Blue Bloods, only one has made it to the Sweet 16 in the tournament, and that was Greg Oden, and he joined a team that was previously 26-6 in the season before that. So all these other guys committing to in-state schools like Kevin Durant didn't make it far in the tournament. Ben Simmons didn't even make it to the tournament. Markel Fultz didn't make it to the tournament. So you see the correlation here is that they're joining bad teams probably because they want to be the guy. And you can say whatever you want about that, but I think even if you don't go to Kentucky, I think if you're a blue blood, these blue blood schools and coaches know how to develop you better. And unless you're just super talented, it doesn't matter. You really could. I mean, it could help you. It could earn you money just by going there and getting you a higher draft pick.
So that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, with Anthony Edwards commit, this year Georgia's 10-13, 1-9 in the SEC. They're the buns. They're not good. How do you think this shakes up Georgia's record, Georgia's program, being able to land a top draft prospect like this, and just like what this means? Like, is Georgia even going to be able to compete in the SEC, where you have dominance with this year number 1 Tennessee, number 5 Kentucky? We got LSU and Mississippi State and Auburn all rolling around the AP top 25. How can Georgia, with just Anthony Edwards and 2 4-stars?
Yeah, 2 4-stars.
2 4-stars compete in the loaded SEC.
I think you're right. Georgia is bad this year, and even Tom Crean said it yesterday, which is kind of a news story. The day before Anthony Edwards committed, he threw his players under the bus. He said yesterday, "It's my fault for not cutting them when I got here. That's how bad they are." To me, I wouldn't want to play for that coach, and that would be something that sways me. But obviously, Anthony Edwards probably already made the decision. It was kind of a foregone conclusion already. But so he does join 2 4-stars right now. But also, you've seen with these top recruits that go to these kind of schools, they have the ability to kind of reel in more talent. Like Kevin Durant, I think after he committed to Texas, got 6 other guys to come with him. And they weren't 5-stars, obviously, but they want to play with Kevin Durant. Ben Simmons did the same thing with LSU. They had a lot of talent that year. So I think things could shake out where they get another guy, but there's not much to choose from at this point. I think there's 5 guards left in the top 100 that haven't committed, and maybe 8 overall that haven't committed, so they don't have much to choose from. And I don't think that any of them are considering Georgia. So it looks like this is what they got. I don't think that Anthony Edwards is going to make that big of a difference unless he is a transcendent talent. And even still, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons couldn't do it. I think it's too hard to be a freshman, especially since he's reclassified. He's younger than most guys. He needs the maturity, and I don't think Tom Crean can develop him enough to where they can be a team that actually matters in the SEC. And also, another reason he said that he went to Georgia is Tom Crean coached Victor Oladipo and Dwayne Wade, 2 guys he looks up to a lot. So,
who both had successful NBA careers too. So.
Yeah, but it also took them a couple of years to develop. They weren't coming in, they weren't like the huge 5-star talent that he is. So we'll see how this shakes out. I do think he'll be an interesting watch. He'll be entertaining to watch. I don't know though if he will make it a winning program. I don't think so. That's what I'm going to say right now. I don't think they will be very good next year.
Well,
they'll be better than this year, not as good.
This is a nice transition into, I think, our next topic. When you talk about this year, I mean, it's February 11th. March is 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's talk about national title contenders. To me, my Final Four, trying not to be biased here, is Tennessee, Virginia, Duke, and Kentucky. I think that the Zags have had a generally easy record. I think our losses are bad, but we have a lot of high quality wins. Duke is just, I mean, you heard it 24/7 if you're listening to this. I mean, Duke is dominant. Zion is dominant. Tennessee is incredible. Tennessee is loaded with Grant Williams and Admiral. So, what do you think? What's your Final Four? What's your winner?
First of all, we have to preface this. This is partly a Kentucky basketball podcast because we are students at the University of Kentucky, and most of you are probably watching for this very reason. So, but what I think is, I think the two safest bets, and obviously in the tournament, the best team does not win all the time. So, but I think the two safest bets are actually Duke and Kentucky because I think they're playing the best basketball out of anybody right now. Even though Kentucky's 5, it's those early losses that are keeping them at 5. Yeah, they're 3 points away from having only one loss right now. Their 2 losses besides Duke are a combined 3 points loss. So I think those two are playing the best basketball right now, and I don't think that they're done getting better. So, and those coaches are really good at getting young talent to be better and growing throughout the year. So I'm thinking those are my two Final Four locks. My other possibilities, I'm going to say Tennessee is not going to make the Final Four. They have a really good offense. They actually have the 3rd adjusted offense in the country according to KenPom, but they have the 40th defense. And I think that defense is going to allow these mid-majors who shoot a lot to just go off. And I think obviously it depends on the role that they get. If they get a good bracket or if they get a hot team, I think that that's going to happen. We'll have to see what the bracket comes out. But I'm going to go ahead and say that Tennessee is on upset alert. If they get past the mid-majors, I think that they have a pretty good chance to get to the Final Four. And then I'm actually going to say Gonzaga is good. I think Gonzaga is good, just based on the numbers that I've seen. And I know they haven't played a ton of people. Who they have beaten is Duke and Washington. And Washington is going to win the Pac-12 by a lot this year. So those are 2 really good teams that they have good wins over. Other than that, it's not a ton. But also, they've been to, I think, 4 straight Sweet 16s. And that's something that Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, all these Bluebird programs cannot say.
Right.
So I know that their reputation is to be chokers, and they don't make it past the Sweet 16 often. They make it to the Elite Eight every now and then, and I think maybe Final Four twice in the last couple of decades. But for that first part of the bracket, I mean, they are proven. Mark Few is a great coach, and I think they have 1 lottery pick and a 2nd potential lottery pick on their team. And I think the luck of the draw is just Mark Few didn't schedule really good. Didn't plan a very good schedule for them to prove themselves. But what they did schedule, they have proven, and it's Duke and Washington. So I think that's my 4th Final Four. So Duke, Kentucky, Gonzaga. Did I say anybody else? I talked about how Tennessee wasn't. I'm going to say.
Probably Virginia, man.
I'm going to say Virginia's the safe one. Will be my 4th, but I'm also going to say one dark horse, and it may surprise you. I'm going to say Wisconsin is the dark horse.
Really?
Yes, they have kind of blazed onto the scene since conference play started. Nobody was really talking about them, and I think nobody still is talking about them. But since conference play started, they have been tearing it up. Their first matchup with Michigan, they won, and they've been beat. And Big Ten is arguably the best conference in college basketball right now. I think that they don't have the top teams that the ACC does, but they are from top to bottom probably the best conference. So I think all those wins is doing really good, and they've proved that they can beat a team like Michigan. So I think if they get the lucky draw with the tournament and if they don't get those mid-majors that get hot, I think they have a real good chance of getting to the Final Four. And I think they're not gonna have a target on their back. Teams like Nevada, they're gonna have a target on their back. Last year they were successful because nobody had heard of them until the tournament.
And
Nobody was
playing.
Yeah, nobody was getting up to play, and
Right.
nobody was getting hyped to play Nevada. Now, they've been top 10 all year. They're going to have a target on their back, even for teams that are worse than them. And I do think they're a good team, but now they're going to have to deal with the heat that these Bluebird programs deal with every year in the tournament. And I think that's what the benefit for Wisconsin is this year, is I don't think anybody thinks anything of them, but I do think that they're really good. They have a top 20 Ken Pom defense, and they're just outside the top 20 in offense. So I think they're really close.
So you said your underdog was Wisconsin.
Yes.
I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to say my underdog. It's not so much an underdog, but I'm going to say that a team that is a little overlooked right now is Marquette, and mostly because of Marcus Howard.
Yeah.
I think Marcus Howard is the type of guy that thrives in March. He's a high-scoring, high-velocity guard.
Yeah.
And those plays come out in March. And they do have high-quality wins, too. They just beat Villanova. They smashed Buffalo, who was number 14 at the time, by 20. They have wins over number 12 Wisconsin, and number 12 at the time Kansas State. I mean, they have 2 losses to a number 2 Kansas and an Indiana team, and 4 losses. And they haven't beat St. John's. That's strange. A 20-point blowout to St. John's and a 1-point loss to St. John's. But I'm just going to say that Marcus Howard is way more of an X factor in March than he is in the regular season. He's a guy that's dropped 53, 45, 45 again, 37. Like, these high velocity guards, they come out in March. And I think that Marcus Howard really can make some noise, and I would not want to play him in the tournament.
Do you think he has a little bit of Kemba in him?
A little bit of Kemba, a little bit of Kemba.
And that's